get the screen up. Lovely. All right, welcome everybody, and welcome to everyone in the gallery too. It's nice to have people from the community wanting to talk to us, ask us questions and observe our meetings. So thank you for coming on this cold night. If we can please stand for the acknowledgement of country, diversity, commitment and service acknowledgement. The City of Victor Harbor acknowledges the Ramangeri and the Narrandjeri people, the traditional custodians of the land and surrounding waters where we live and work. We acknowledge their deep concern, their deep connection to country, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. This respect is extended to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across Australia. Would somebody like to read the diversity commitment? Thank you, Councillor Mann.
The City of Victor Harbor is committed to diversity, equity and inclusion. We respect people of all ages, abilities, genders, sexualities, religions, beliefs, cultures and backgrounds.
The service acknowledgement, if someone will. Thank you, Councillor Burns.
We acknowledge the brave individuals who've served and continue to serve our nation. We remember those who've lost their lives and paid the ultimate sacrifice to our country.
Thank you. And the prayer. Thank you, Councillor Quinton.
Almighty God, we ask that you bless this council and allow it to be an agent of change to the people of this city and beyond. Direct and prosper in its deliberations to the honouring of your name and the welfare of the people whom it serves. Amen.
Amen. Please be seated. We do have a couple of apologies tonight, Councillor Henderson and Councillor Mackenzie. We have a couple of adjourned items or items lying on the table. The first item at 4.1 is the land disposal at Lot A, Bluff, Crescent, Encounter Bay. That motion before council was moved by Councillor Kemp and it was seconded by Councillor Burns. And we can continue doing the discussion. If the current motion is resolved, then recommendations 1 to 5 should follow. But we're looking at the moment that the Chief Executive Officer be authorised to negotiate with each property owner and if enough interest is obtained as not to landlock any portion of the subject land, do all things necessary to complete the land disposal. We can continue with that debate. And if Councillor Kemp or Councillor Burns, because it has come from the last meeting, want to contribute to the debate again, I'm happy for them to do so. Councillor Kemp.
It's just a question because I believe part of the reason why we adjourned this recommendation for was to get more information from the residents as to who's willing to negotiate with the council. The report doesn't actually provide any further information than previously because talking to some of the residents there, some are in favour, some are not. So before we spend money on this recommendation going forward, I think we should have a fairer indication of who exactly is going to commit. Then we'll know if there's going to be any landlocked pieces of land because nobody wants to purchase. So I just thought that that's the reason. So I won't be supporting this motion.
Do you want to respond to that, Victoria?
Just through the Mayor, just noting there is additional commentary based on the adjournment and the workshop with members, but also that was the whole point of the motion was the delegation to enable those negotiations to ensure that no parcels were landlocked. And obviously if we weren't able to achieve that, it would be coming back to the chamber. So that work is part of that delegation to enable that to happen, but again, be guided by what the chamber looks to achieve.
Thank you, Councillor Burns.
Further to the CEO's comments, I was actually going to ask a similar thing, which is, do we have any update at all? I understand there still may be discussions going on, but does the CEO have a feel for already how many of the residents may not be interested or are interested? Because it really needs to be the majority to make it viable. And if you don't at this point, that's fine.
Yeah, no, other than those that have already specified within the report, no, I don't have any particular property owners that are have committed.
Councillor Mann.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Jenkins. No, there was some very good discussion around this item at the workshop, and I think one of the takeaways was whether council was prepared to spend funds investigating and going through the costs associated to then have the negotiations with landowners when the chances that some or many of the landowners may not agree or may not agree to the council's valuation, noting there was another valuation of land put up by one of the residents, which would have a pretty marginal income or benefit to council if we all went through with it. I think at this stage, it's something where this work can, I guess, sit on a shelf. And if there was a stage where all the landowners got together and said, yep, we want to proceed with it, or we're all in agreement, and then they came back to council to push that would be a different story. But I think at this stage, I'm not necessarily seeing the buy-in from all the residents that needs to be there for this to even take off. So at this stage, I don't think I can support it.
Any further discussion? Councillor Kremper.
Thank you, Mayor. I would agree with the members. I think maybe there's only a few people that are interested in this, but maybe they could go do the legwork and speak to their fellow neighbours and then come to council with a consensus. And as far as I'm concerned, unless everybody's going to be in, then it doesn't get sold.
Thank you. Councillor Burns, you seconded this. Do you want to close the debate if there's no further? No? Sorry, Councillor Kemp, you moved this. Does anybody else want to speak? No, don't want to close the debate, Councillor Kemp?
Yes, I'll close the debate. Basically, this is a reserve which has been untouched for many years. And it's one of those reserves, I think, comes in the classification. And of course, I'll seek the information from the CEO. That's a class C or D type reserve where council does nothing with it. It's just becomes a natural corridor for our ecosystems of birds and various insects and whatever. So I think, for us to maintain that, I think that we'll keep it as it is and not support this motion.
Thank you. That debate is closed. All those in favour of the motion? Those against? That motion is lost. We now move to the second adjourned item or item lying on the table. That item hadn't been moved, but Braden, you want to move that?
I'd like to move something slightly different, a motion that incorporates both the first two, then adds a third element, but all move together if possible, and I can read that out.
Yes.
The motion is that council, 1, endorse the concept floor plan for the recreational facility within the Regional Community Sport and Recreation Precinct as provided at attachment 1 for the purpose of progressing detailed design. 2, in the detailed design include a 3 metre wide times 6 metre long times 2 metre deep foam pit for gymnastics use, expanding the proposed without expanding the proposed building footprint, and that the building case be updated to reflect the likely additional cost. And 3, extend the current heads of agreement with Accord for the precinct, which expires on 31 August 2025 to 31 December 2025, to support the continued progress on the detailed design, due diligence, and enable further consideration by council.
Thank you. I might just ask the CEO to speak to that third recommendation that you've got in there. If there's any further information that
not so much further information, but it would require if it is due to expire on the 31st of August. Council's already extended it twice, just to allow for further or ongoing negotiations with the developer, and we are still in the midst of those. So this would actually provide some more time. The council still yet to give further consideration to the operating models. We're envisaging a workshop during August, possibly September. We don't anticipate decisions coming to the chamber until probably September, because it needs to go through the Audit and Risk Committee. So this will provide more time for that to happen.
Thank you. Do I have somebody to second those 3 recommendations on block? Thank you, Councillor Quinton. Braden, do you want to speak to?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I guess in terms of the first two, I think it's looking at a gymnastics club, and if we're able to bring the whole facility, the whole precinct together and provide for our local gymnastics club, it would be good to give them competition level facilities, such as a foam pit, and I think it's worth looking at what that detailed or those costings would be, and look at whether that can be put within that existing building footprint, because I think there is some utility of, if we're going to do it once, it is good to do it right. But I think what the costings and the operating model will feed into this. But I think as in terms of looking at purely from that design perspective, I think it's worth trying to incorporate that. I guess in terms of the third one with the heads of agreement, I know we've extended it multiple times, and
sorry, Brandon, your voice is sort of breaking up a little bit. If you can you just
yeah, sure thing. Is that better?
Yeah, that's
sorry about that.
better. Sorry.
With that third motion, we have extended the heads of agreement multiple times already, and it's highly unlikely that everything's all going to be resolved by the 31st of August. So I think there's still a lot of discussions, a lot of negotiations, a lot of investigations still to be had, particularly in relation to the operating model and how we can make something work with everyone. So I think extending this a bit longer gives that additional time. And since we're dealing with the precinct in this motion, I think it's appropriate to include it in there.
Thank you. Councillor Quinton, would you like to speak to that? No. Would anybody like to? Councillor Carempa and Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. I was considering supporting the first two, but now this amendment's been added on, I'm not going to support it. I think that by signing onto the heads agreement till December just locks us out of changing anything within those heads of agreement, which might be more favourable to the council. I think that's a long way away. I think there's a lot of still to discussion, and obviously with the email the elected members have received, I think from basketball, I think there needs to be some further discussion and locking us into the 31st of December. Is that right? To the end of December? Yep, 31st of December. I think it's way too long. I think we need to, if we need to correct course, we can't do it now unless we set up another motion. And I've got no issues with extending the heads of agreement. That's what you do during contract negotiations. But locking in us till the 31st, I'm not going to support that.
Thank you, Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. I also have similar concerns. I was supportive of the first two motions, even though the clubs still probably haven't signed off fully, but I think there's opportunities for discussions there. But I'm just concerned that the third option is premature until the CEO can come back with some feedback from the current discussions. We won't be in a position, now we may very well extend it, but that should really be something for August, not for July.
Thank you. Councillor Schiller.
Is there any reason why it needs to be extended to that extent? Could it come back to, say, October or something like that?
I'm happy if the consensus is around that length of time being to December. I think the intent was that it's clearly going to need to be done longer than in about a month's time. If it's the end of October, I'm happy to vary it to be then instead, with the consent of the seconder.
So going the 31st of October. Are you happy with that, Councillor Quinton? Thank you. Is that okay with you, Councillor Schiller?
Does that allow us to get it to the Audit and Risk Committee? Yes, it will. We'll be calling a special Audit and Risk Committee.
Is there any further discussion? Councillor Kemp.
It's just some questions just to start off with first. The cost to council in doing this project so far, there is of course, we're talking about designs here. So my understanding was originally that we were going to look at designs, maybe purchase them or maybe not. But now from an email today, just confirming that we are now committed to buying those designs if we go ahead with it or not. Sorry, if we don't go ahead with it. And plus the cost to the linear group is looking after or helping us. So I'm just wondering, there's about 950,000 that this council's up for if we don't go ahead with the project. Is that correct?
Victoria?
Through the Mayor. So if council is to purchase the detailed designs, the agreement is if, depending on the progress and or the completion of the designs up to 750,000, council would purchase them and own them in perpetuity so that it could deliver that precinct on its own if it so chose. And that was a decision council made with the first renewal of the heads of agreement, so that we would be ready either for submission for grant funding, because we need to be have detailed designs, a development application submitted to actually be ready for a number of the grants, whether we are delivering ourselves or we're doing it in partnership with the developer. That was the reasons behind the detailed design, and that was up to an amount of 750,000. And the other costs from memory was about 130,000 that we've already spent on consultants and business case modelling, etc.
Just another question along the lines of, wouldn't it be more prudent for council to have a better decision-making process by understanding the true costs with our prudential report and our business case finished prior to making any decisions for going forward or more negotiations?
Again, that's a decision for the chamber to make, but the chamber has made the decision to enter into direct negotiations and a heads of agreement with the developer for a public-private partnership with the intent of delivering a facility through a partnership. And yes, there are some decision points or mechanisms still to be had, but the council's chosen to head down that path with a partnership, which included the detailed designs.
Yeah, personally myself, again, I don't agree with the third recommendation. I think we need to have more information before we continue down the heads of an agreement and to find exactly where we are situated. So I can't support this on block, so I just have to vote against it.
Right. And so just to explain for members, because there was comments talked about wanting to change the heads of agreement. The heads of agreement is just the grounding framework in which the council is negotiating this public-private partnership. It's not the details of the agreement for lease. It's in regards to the details of how we are negotiating the partnership. And if we do come to the stage where we're at a juncture where we're drafting up an agreement for lease, that is the next agreement we're entering into. So the heads of agreement is the framework in which we are negotiating. It doesn't mean we've entered into any agreement with the developer at this stage. We are still negotiating.
Councillor Crimber, you have a question.
I do, Matt. Just a question for the CEO. Does the current heads of agreement preclude us from investigating any other option other than dealing with the developer?
Yes, it does, because you've actually made a commitment from going out for an expression of interest to be committed to seeing this through to either execution or not. That you've actually genuinely committed to explore the public-private partnership.
Just a follow-up.
As a council, as an organisation.
Just a follow-up question. Did we vote on committing to these plans? I can't remember voting on actually committing to spending $750,000 on a set of plans. I know we were talking about it had to go for detailed design and we need this to go forward, but I can't remember, and maybe you can tell me what motion it was where we clearly voted on committing to buying a set of plans that potentially we may not use.
Yes, you did. There was a specific resolution in which council chose. There was 3 decisions. It was around extending the heads of agreement. It was actually for council to be considered as an operator of the facility and not a Belgravia type opponent. The council wanted to explore that option with the developer. And it was also to actually proceed to detailed design of the facility. And if the partnership did not come to fruition, council would have the obligation of buying back those detailed designs so that it could use it to deliver the facility on its own. So it was a decision of this chamber. And if it was a decision of this chamber to have explored other models, that's where we would have been exploring. But this was a commitment of the chamber to head down this path.
Councillor Burns, you had a question?
Thank you, Mayor. It was just a clarification question to the CEO. I think if during our further investigations and cost analysis, we find that it's not viable to continue with the developer model, then the plans that we purchased, we cannot afford to build in our own right, as we couldn't with the previous council option. So what value would those plans have? I understand that it would identify what the clubs need, but if without a developer we can't build it ourselves, I'm just wondering, and therefore we would have to scale back, which means redoing the plans anyway. So I'm not quite sure. I just think I understand what's trying to be done. I just think it's premature. And I understand the decision that was made. Unfortunately, I was in Melbourne and I would have voted against it. But I would have thought that if we buy plans, they have to be of some use to us.
So obviously, if you weren't privy to the debate, from what I recall, in terms of that discussion, it was actually council has explored delivering a facility up to a $25 million facility on its own. It would have to, as it currently is, borrow components of it and then seek grant funding for the remainder of it. So it's not to say it can't deliver it. It can't afford to deliver it without either a public-private partnership or significant borrowings. We have presented that to the chamber into the types of borrowings and the type of grant funding we would require. It's not to say that we couldn't, it would just take longer and it would require significant application to both state and federal government to seek grant funding.
Is there any further discussion? Councillor Schiller, you've got a question? Yep.
It's about the foam pit at the moment. We've got an estimation of how much it would cost. Is there the ability to put a part of the motion to cap that so that we've had the few figures flying around earlier, and I would hate to lock that in and then find it is going to cost significantly more.
The recommendation doesn't include any specific cost. When at the special council meeting on the 14th of October, council resolved that the detailed design, the maximum purchase price not being any more than $750,000 if we were to buy that, but the current recommendations to council tonight doesn't have any costs associated with it.
Just in terms of the report on page 18, it actually refers to those for the anchor points for which the gymnastics are also seeking and the pit. It's a cost estimate of between 80 and 100,000 at this stage, but the developers have also said, like with many things, we're not going to see the true costs of all of those elements until we get the detailed design. So even during the detailed design phase, we will still be privy to that information. If it was going to exceed that amount, they would be back in touch with us. We've made it very clear in terms of council's contribution would not be escalating further than the $11.7 million. So even though we're signing, if council does, this motion is carried, it's about progressing from concept to actually some detailed designs, in which case we would get further costings.
Councillor Prember, you have another question.
I do, thank you, Mayor. Just wondering, have all the concerns of the major stakeholders being basketball and gymnastics been addressed in the new plan? So if we decide to go down the detailed design option and pay for these plans, have all their issues or all their requirements been addressed?
The two stakeholders of many that you've referenced just now are part of the reference group that we've actually been engaging with the developers and with the architects. So they've had direct input into these concepts designs, and where we've incorporated pretty much all of their requests. I'm sure we've not done every single one of them, but we have been able to come to an agreement where all of those parties in the reference group were happy with those concept designs. You were privy and part of the briefing with gymnastics, where they expressed their desire for a pit, and that now has been incorporated.
Okay, what about the mezzanine for basketball?
There is no mezzanine. That was made very clear probably by about the second workshop, and we've had direct discussions with Great Southern Basketball. There is one member who's actually not part of the Great Southern Committee, but who has actually partaked in the reference group discussions, which is Mr. Scarvellis, who would like to have a mezzanine floor in there, but that is not incorporated because it is not within our budget.
Thank you. Councillor Mann, would you like to close the debate?
Yeah, no, thank you, Mejing. I guess definitely appreciate the views around the chamber. I think there's still a lot of work and a lot of investigation and discussions and negotiations to be had. It's, even though it's been going on for such a long time, we are still have a lot of work to do to get this right. And I dare say we'll probably be coming back and extending it till end of December again. But if this is where the chamber's a bit more comfortable, I'm happy with how it's proposed.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. I'll now put that motion to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. A division. Those in favour, please stand. Councillor Mann, Councillor Filler, Councillor Quinton and Councillor Schofield. Those against, Councillor Burns, Councillor Karemba and Councillor Kemp. That motion is carried. We now go to 5.1, minutes of the previous meeting, being the 23rd of June, and the recommendation is that those be confirmed as true and accurate. Does anyone have any questions about those minutes? You moving that way, Councillor Schiller? Thank you. And seconding that, please, Councillor Mann. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. We have one deputation. And that is Mr. Robert Cawood. Mr. Cawood, if you'd like to come and take a seat at the back, Councillor Kemp will show you how to turn the microphone on.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for letting me talk to you tonight. I'm Robert Cawood. My wife and I run the Beachside Market here in Victor Harbour. The reason I'm talking to you this evening is that the new... Is that better?
Yep.
The reason I'm talking to you is that the new and old conditions regards vehicles on the reserve does not allow them to remain on the reserve. If council enforced this rule, we would be in trouble. I used to talk with Michelle Griffiths, but she was on holiday, so I talked to others who interpret the conditions differently regarding market matters. We have motor vehicles along the seaside and each end, that's 21 vehicles, with some trailers, and they enter reserve and exit once. If they park on the roadside, 21 plus parking spaces for visitors would be lost. Next thing, we are in trouble with the nearby businesses, such as the restaurants and pub. We have been parking vehicles for over 30 years with no known problems to the trees or grass. We've had no complaints from the council. Trees in the foreshore car park and south side of Victoria Street have bitumen up to their trunks, and the cars every day pass them or park beside them with no known problems. So on some very good days, and that does happen with us down at the market, we often get a wind between 1 and 2 p.m, which can be gale force. So the market has to be closed down for safety. By 4 p.m, that wind has usually stopped. Can you imagine the chaos with storeholders trying to get onto the reserve to pack up with about 50 stalls? Tempers would be flying. The current system, this does not happen. The other two markets in Victor Harbour do not have the weather we have to contend with, i.e. afternoon gales. Wait work to hold marquees, or gazebos, in Welch Terrace for artisan market. Waits do not hold at the beachside market. We have to peg. The Gould and Port Elliot markets let vehicles stay on the market round, as does the Willunga Quarry market. The toilet cleaner parks his vehicle on the reserve when he cleans the toilet. Some of our storeholders have weighty goods, such as Luke Craig, Copper Art, Rex from the Barossa has stone iron work. Dennis and Leslie and Dennis is present here in the market, in the chambers, have extensive artwork. And Greg, with his crystals and mineral specimens, has a weighty load. And he has been coming to the market for over 33 years. So we don't want to lose him. East of Sunday, the artisan market was able to trade, but the beachside market could not due to the strong winds, making it unsafe to trade. Janet and I are both into our 70s. One day we will pass the market on to a new approved operator. We want the rules to be understandable and to all with no misinterpretations. What about the council staff member to spend a day at the market to see how we operate and meet the stallholders? We operate differently to the other markets in the town. Also, please note the Beachside Market donates money to Michael Willett, the town crier, to promote the market and other businesses in Victor, and to also act as a sort of interpretation and information to our out-of-town visitors. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cawood. You have some questions for Mr. Cawood, Councillor Kemp, Councillor Corremba, Councillor Burns, and Councillor Poynton.
Yeah, Rob, thanks very much for coming in. What are the new conditions in the lease which affects your running of the market?
Just the parking of vehicles on the reserve. We did get the times of operation extended, and I'm very happy with that. So in other words, people can start getting there at 5:30, which they were doing. And basically by 6 p.m, all stallholders have left. So that's quite acceptable to me.
Thank you. Councillor Corremba.
Thank you for your deputation. Just wondering, do all your stallholders take every possible measure to protect the ground they drive on? So they're not doing burnouts or wheelie work or anything notorious like that. They're just literally driving the cars in. And a lot of your stallholders, are they sort of older people? So to drive from a parking area with their equipment and back would be more prohibitive?
I suppose most would be 40 plus.
Yep.
We do have a lot of 70-year-olds.
Yep.
That do come. There's a few younger ones, but most would be round retiring age. Yes, they'd have to be round the retiring age.
Yeah, right. And sorry, how long has the market been running for?
Well, it started in 1987, and we've been on the current grounds since 1994. And that was due to us causing problems at the Masonic Hall, i.e. traffic jams. And basically at the time, Rob Welch was the CEO, and he basically said, make the market work.
Okay, so you're almost up for heritage listing then, eh? Thanks.
Councillor Burns. Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you for coming in and talking to elected members. I am pleased that your operating hours have been sorted. I'm struggling a little bit to understand what the issue with the trees is, because I've been down to the market a number of times myself, and I've seen vehicles parking next to the stalls, but not next to the trees. And if in 30 odd years there hasn't been any issues, I'm trying to understand why is there issues now, and why is it an issue for vehicles parking in this area, but it's not an issue for people to park in the council car park that actually has the same trees with car spots actually lined over the root structure exposed, which I would have thought would be more of an issue, where the roots are underground. And if it hasn't been an issue, then I'm struggling to see why this is a particular concern. I mean, unless, something, as you said, you're not aware of any damage at all. So I'm struggling to understand how that can even be a valid argument.
Well, I don't really understand either. I'm not a tree expert. I'm just a farmer. But yeah, with broad acre farming, that we actually cultivate right up to about a foot away from a tree bases. and it doesn't seem to kill the eucalyptus. So I think it's just got to be generous. I think it's a bit of a making a molehill into a mountain, to be honest with you. Thank you.
Councillor Quinton.
Thanks for coming in and for your deputation. I just want to run a bit of an idea past you and just see what you'd think about if we shifted the market to the western end of Ocean Street and make it a pedestrian only zone for the period of time with the markets are on. I reckon that would solve the issue with bringing vehicles in. It would help with the issues of having wild weather that you mentioned between the hours of 1 and 2. And it would also bring a lot of new life into Ocean Street regularly and bring a lot more foot traffic to the existing shops. What do you reckon about that?
Well, I have actually run to about 3 markets in Ocean Street, and we went from the Hotel Crown right through to Torres Street, and we had about 75 stalls. But then there was a few changes of rules, and I said, no, you're throwing too much back on me, and I went back to our current crown. But yes, it is possible.
Thank you, Mr. Cawood. We are running out of time, and I will just give an opportunity for one of our staff members to respond to some of those questions about the impact of cars on the trees before you go.
Yeah, thank you. Through the mayor, the request for additional parking on the Soldier Memorial Reserve during market days presents several challenges, particularly concerning the Norfolk Island pines. Norfolk Island pines are a predominant feature and a prominent feature of coastal reserves. They require well-drained, sandy loam soils enriched with organic matter to thrive. While they will tolerate salty winds in a range of environments, these trees are highly sensitive to compacted or poorly drained soils. Vehicle access within or adjacent to the tree protection zones poses significant risk. Soil compaction from vehicles reduces spore space, impeding air and water flow to the root systems. This can result in root respiration, reduced nutrient uptake, and heightened vulnerability to disease and drought. Ongoing compaction may lead to canopy thinning, stunted growth, and long-term structural decline. In accordance with Australian Standard 4970 of 2009, protection of trees on development sites, parking within tree protection zones should be avoided unless suitable ground protection measures, such as load-spreading surfaces or temporary decking, should be implemented. These strategies are essential for maintaining soil integrity and protecting root health during development and site use. The City of Victor Harbor is renowned for its Norfolk pines within the Soldier Memorial Reserve, boasting a healthy stand, a testament to the dedicated care of past and present staff. Some of these Norfolk pines could be as old as 80 years, nearing the end of their natural lifespan. This fact must be taken into consideration, as any changes to their growing conditions, such as increased soil compaction, can have dramatic consequences. A clear example of this can be seen in the Norfolk pines in the car park, adjacent to the Soldier Memorial Reserve, where these trees are in visible decline, and planning for their replacement is becoming necessary. The Soldier Memorial Reserve is a significant site in the history of the City of Victor Harbor, deserving of respect, careful management. Every effort should be made to preserve its high standards, to which these Norfolk pines contribute significantly. And if you have a look at the photographs, in particular aerial photography, you can see the difference between those that are in the reserve and those that are in the car park. There's a stark difference between the health of those trees.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much, Robert, for your deputation. It's appreciated you coming and talking to us.
Thank you.
We now move to questions from the gallery, and Frank Sankovic, is that how I pronounce your name, Frank? Sankovic, I do apologise. We have met quite a while ago when you were first came down. Please ask your question, and we'll see if we can answer it.
Mayor Jenkins and Ms. McCurdy and elected councillors, thank you for allowing the time for me to ask a couple of questions regarding public health and some environmental safety obligations. There's confirmed presence of asbestos in the soil surrounding Mount Brecon and the development. And the development has been going on for now almost 3 years. It's been staged. We talk about vegetation. Removal of vegetation has unfortunately not held the soil and it's exposed the asbestos, which has been confirmed. So my question is, what steps is the City of Victor Harbor taking or prepared to take to actively monitor, enforce and mitigate the potential health and environmental risks arising from potentially airborne asbestos fibres, particularly where the development and community corporation manager have not acknowledged residents' concerns? In addition, what protections can adjoining property owners within and outside of the development as each lot becomes disturbed by excavations known as them become hot lots?
Yeah. Thank you for that. Certainly the City of Victor Harbor is aware of community concerns about possible asbestos at the Mount Brecon site. It's important to understand that asbestos management and safety on work sites is not the council's responsibility. These matters fall under Safe Work SA, who enforce the laws and make sure that asbestos is handled appropriately by the contractors. Council actually doesn't have the power to monitor or enforce asbestos safety on construction sites. When concerns have been raised with us, what we've done is referred them to the right authorities such as Safe Work SA and the EPA, and Council will continue to forward any complaints that we receive about asbestos to those relevant authorities that can do something about it and is within their remittance. So we'd encourage adjoining property owners with concerns to also get in touch with the EPA or Safe Work SA.
We have done that.
Great.
But there are two, there was exposed pipes which had friable asbestos that was taken care of, and WorkSafe SA handed the certificate but did not acknowledge the surrounding site where the soil has been re-engineered and spread over the whole area. So they've come back and said, here's your certificate.
Yep.
But we still have an issue. And if I may add, asbestos is one problem. The other thing is dust, which potentially these two problems can lead to either mesothelioma or silicosis.
Yep.
And you won't know that to 10 to 15 years. Now, we've had a resident who's been hospitalised for 4 days last December, and this is why I took action to actually get the soil tested.
So what I'd say
Yes.
is go back to Safe Work SA and the EPA
Yes,
about
understood.
those concerns.
Understood.
And your second question?
So as, well, I think you've answered it. I guess the first question is you mentioned the word assume that there is asbestos. So the question is, do you acknowledge that this situation has arisen, or at least in part due to a lack of transparent planning oversight, and commit to commissioning an independent investigation in how the development was approved without formal recognition of known asbestos hazard associated with its history of housing, where the RAAF trainees were stationed at Mount Brecon in Nissan huts that were known to be constructed from materials containing asbestos.
In terms of lack of transparent planning oversight, the original Mount Brecon development, as I understand it, that application was assessed under the Development Act 1993. At that time, there were no formal planning requirements to assess site contamination, such as asbestos, unless it was specifically identified through referrals or supporting documentation. The new Planning, Development and Infrastructure Act of 2016 includes much stricter site contamination rules, but that act did not apply when the Mount Brecon development was approved. Asbestos risks remain regulated, as I said previously, by Safe Work SA and the EPA, not Council, and are not considered a trigger for planning refusal unless formally raised in the assessment process. So as such, council wasn't in any position to assess or act on the presence of asbestos unless it was formally presented as part of the application. In relation to your request for an independent investigation, council is not proposing to initiate one at this time. However, we do remain open to reviewing any new or formal evidence and will continue to work with the appropriate state agencies to ensure community concerns are heard and addressed. And I'd reiterate, sing out to Safe Work SA and the EPA.
Thank you. I understand. It's quite clear.
Thank you very much. We don't have any petitions. Beg your pardon. Councillor Greenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a question, maybe the CEO may know, but do we know if any of the contaminated fill from the Florio Regional Waste facility ended up at Mount Bracken at any stage during the development?
Not
No?
that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I'm sure they would have been captured with all the other calls that have gone out, but I'm not aware of any.
Thanks.
We now move to 9.1 outstanding resolutions, and the recommendation is that councillor receive the July report. If someone would like to move that way, moved councillor Mann. And seconded, please, councillor Schofield. Does anybody have any questions about the outstanding resolutions? If not, all those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. We have the Mayoral report, April to June, and the recommendations that council receive and note that report. If someone would like to move that way. Thank you, councillor Schofield. And seconding that, please, councillor Schiller. Does anybody have any questions about the Mayoral report? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. But 9.3, we have Victor Harbour Future Ready Stakeholder Reference Group. The recommendation is that council establish the Victor Harbour Future Ready Stakeholder Reference Group. I think councillor Mann talked about this previously, and adopt the guidelines that were provided in attachment 1. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, councillor Burns. And seconding that, please, councillor Kemp. Do either of you want to speak to that?
I think it's important for this reference group to provide feedback to elected members and council. It's really a demographics that we only get limited view of, and I think that it would provide valuable insights into areas when we do our strategic planning, if there are areas that we need to include that we hadn't thought about. So I think it's a good idea. And I also probably want to nominate a couple of people for this committee. I'd like to be on it myself, but I think it's actually important.
We'll go on to that second recommendation after the first one's been passed. Councillor Kemp, you wanted to speak? No? Does anybody else want to speak to the first recommendation? Councillor Mann?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Yeah, no, I guess just to reiterate previously discussed that there's a lot of importance of having this targeted group to help guide the consultation and the strategy that's developed. I dare say this will probably be the largest targeted consultation of our young people in Victor's history. So I think it's a major strategy and a major project, and I think going to this extra length of having this stakeholder reference group to help assist with that, and to have community champions who can help encourage others to fill out the consultation and to get involved, I think it will ultimately add to the end success of the strategy.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Does anybody else want to speak to this? If not, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. So we need to have 2 councillors appointed to the group. If there's more than 2 nominate, then we'll have a secret ballot, and I'll hand over to Victoria to conduct that secret ballot. So I would been asked to nominate Councillor Mackenzie who's an apology today, but he's asked for his name to be put down there. Councillor Burns.
I would wish to nominate Councillor Mann. I think he's had a lot of input into the youth areas of Victor Harbour, and I think it would be. I think he has a balanced perspective that would provide good feedback to this committee. I also think that probably one of the more experienced councillors also would be good to be on there, and I'll probably nominate Councillor Karim because of his involvement with youth groups in Victor.
The more experienced or inexperienced? Experienced councillors. Okay. And so he's nominating Councillor Karemba, are you? Yep. Councillor Quinton.
Second the nomination for Councillor Mann, and can I nominate myself as well?
Yep. Okay. Are there any other nominations? Councillor Karemba?
Just a question, since Councillor Burns has nominated me, do I have to accept the nomination or have to nominate myself?
Do you accept the nomination?
Sure.
Okay. So what I'll do is I'll hand over to Victoria. Just put down a motion to appoint her as returning officer, and then we'll do a ballot. So if we can just move, can someone move that we appoint Victoria as the returning officer? Thank you, Councillor Burns. Seconding that, Councillor Schiller. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you.
So thank you, members. Chelsea's about to hand you around a piece of paper. I'm looking for two names, your preferred two representatives to be placed on the ballot paper. And those candidates are Councillor Mackenzie, Councillor Mann, Councillor Karemba and Councillor Quinton. So could you please put your two preferred candidates on your piece of paper, and then Chelsea will collect them. So I currently have one tied. So Councillor Mann with 5 votes has been nominated, but I have a tie with Councillor Kuremba and Councillor Quinton. So I'm going to send out another ballot paper and ask you to mark your one preferred candidate between Councillors Quinton and Kuremba for the position on the reference group. And just try it again. With that, if members are happy, I'm going to put the 2 names into a basically draw them for lots and pull the names out.
Can we look at 3 people?
Correct. Or you could engage, seeing though you're actually somewhat divided, you can engage 3 members.
Yep. So are we happy for the council to appoint Councillor Quinton, Councillor Kuremba and Councillor Mann as the council member representatives to the Victor Harbour Future Ready Strategy Group? Moving that way, Councillor Schofield, and seconding that, Councillor Burns. Councillor Mann, did you have a question?
Yeah, probably just with that motion, just to state that the terms of reference be amended accordingly.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. And that was seconded by Councillor Burns, I think. Any questions in relation to that? No? All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried. And I think that'll make a great reference group, a very broad range of experiences there and passions. We now move to 9.4, which is the Local Government Association proposed item of business. The recommendation is that council approve the following proposed item of business to be submitted to the next meeting of SAROC, which is the South Australian Regional Organisation of Councils, on their October meeting for discussion at the 2025 Local Government Association Annual General Meeting in November.
Could we split them up, please?
Yep, so the first one, we can do that just as one stamp, which is settlement upon completion, first homes. Would somebody like to move that way? Councillor Mann, thank you. And the second, do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Kuremba. Do you want to speak to that, Councillor Mann?
Just to say that it's, I guess everything's sort of covered in that report and the submission.
Thank you, Councillor Kuremba.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I can't support this first one, and I've spoken to Councillor Mann about it. When we encourage federal government to get involved in these sort of things, we find that most of the time things just get worse, not better. and encouraging and incentivising means that the costs to do that will have to be burdened by someone else. And we just are not addressing the real elephant in the room, which is the quantity of people that we have to deal with when it comes to housing. So as much as I can understand what Councillor Mann was trying to do, I just can't support it.
Thank you. Any further discussion, Councillor Schiller?
I've got a similar opinion. I think that by taking an approach of at settlement costs being paid out at that point, it's still costing the purchaser money, in the fact that the developer or whoever is producing these properties will pass those costs on to the eventual purchaser. And so and similarly to Carlos, I don't believe that we need to be delving into this sort of decision within council.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Burns?
Thank you. I'd be interested to see what the state and federal government say about that, because originally historically the settlement upon completion was aimed at apartments within city areas, not rural. And whilst there have been some houses, it's really wasn't initially intended for apartments. And I think the intention is more houses within Victor Harbour rather than apartments. So I will be interested to see what feedback commentary they do say to this.
Thank you. Councillor Mann, do you want to close the debate?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Jenkins. No, I completely appreciate the points shared around the room. I think part of this motion or the intent around it is to start that conversation and start that advocacy. Yes, if there's costs that that may be passed on, or it may be the case that it's the government or councils or state government are able to find ways to help offset some of those costs, whether that's through for the particular blocks of land or houses that are earmarked for first home buyers, whether that's a reduction in the council rates for that particular parcel, whether that's a reduction or a waiver of application fees, whether it's looking at a different way of encouraging these developments. Because I guess if you look at what Victor's going to be growing by and the amount of development earmarked for our town, and particularly some of those larger ones that are very much, I would argue, targeted at an older, wealthier demographic, I think there's great benefit for these new developments to have maybe one or two houses in the street with a young person in them. I think having suburbs that are all but retirement villages, even because of the makeup of people, I think there is a lot of benefit in having multi-generational communities and multi-generational suburbs. And I think this is just one avenue to help try and provide some first home buyers an avenue to get into the market. There's a lot, as the commentary says, there's a lot of people struggling to be able to buy new and then wait for the 2-year build time and pay the interest on that and the interest on the loan and the mortgage, whilst affording market rental costs as well. And so this helps try and defer some of those settlement costs, that interest that the bank slugs you for the land and then the construction loan, and put it off a bit longer to help make buying a new home or building more palatable for first home buyers. Because I guess what we've seen from the state government is that they're not at this stage not willing to budge on in terms of stamp duty exemptions for existing homes or trying to help young people get into existing homes. So I think this very much goes towards what they're wanting to achieve in building and encouraging more new developments and increasing supply for our younger people. I appreciate the concerns, but again, I would put to the councillors that this is starting that discussion, and I think any discussions that we can have and encourage to help our young people are of benefit. And what they do with it and where that comes from, knowing some state and federal government, there may be nothing that comes from this, but I think it's important that we are showing to our community and to our young people that we're willing to fight for them and to advocate on their behalf.
Thank you. I put that first recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? And those against? That's nice.
I'll call a division on that. Thank you.
Thank you. All those in favour, please stand. Knowing that you can change your mind in a division if you want to. That's Braden Mann, Councillor Burns and Councillor Quinton. And those against is Councillor Karemba, Councillor Kemp, Councillor Schiller and Councillor Schofield. The second recommendation is relating to the stamp duty exemption. And would someone like to move that way? Councillor Mann, thank you. And do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Quinton. Councillor Mann, do you want to speak to that?
I'll just take this read in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Quinton. Any further discussion? I'll put that to Councillor Kemp.
I can see where this recommendation is going to, where it's come from. I guess it's an opportunity to see how the government responds to this. Again, they will be losing revenue, and I don't think the government's in a position for wanting to lose revenue, but there's nothing wrong with asking and finding out.
Any further discussion? Councillor Karemba?
I just think I concur with Councillor Kemp. But realistically, what we should be advocating for is just to remove all stamp duty, whether it's first homeowner or second homeowner, just stamp duty in general, because essentially it's just a tax on land exchanging hands. It doesn't really do anything other than to put more money into the state government's coffers. I think we need to send a clear message that just some of these taxes are just now becoming prohibitive for people to buy houses. And if we want to put people in houses, we need to start removing these taxes.
Any further discussion? Councillor Mann, do you want to close the debate? Recognising that closing the debate is not bringing up new information. It's closing the debate.
I'm happy to close that.
All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Number 3, multi-generational residential parks and greater state government funding. Councillor Mann, you moving that? Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Karemba. Councillor Mann, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I'll say a bit to this one then. I guess effectively what this is again doing is starting that conversation with the state government. What we've heard from our consultants as part of the UGMS is that it's going to be very, very difficult, if not impossible, for council to try and put any prevention on the amount of retirement villages and residential parks that are going to come into Victor Harbor and the growth that we're going to have in that area. I think what has really only come to light recently to elected members is around the subsidy that is afforded under the legislation to residential parks and retirement villages based on councils not being able to charge that fixed charge that we would effectively charge on every other property where there's a house or land, and I guess in this sense that fixed charge can't be applied to each of the houses within a residential park, and that there's, I guess the calculations that administration have provided us is that based on the current ones that are being developed, excluding the latest one that's been announced, there's going to be over $600,000 of effectively lost income or subsidy that council will be providing once everything's built. So this is effectively saying that if the state government's wanting us to provide that subsidy, the issue isn't with the subsidy, it's more with the state government should be the one chipping in and helping out with that. And I think this motion is in part to advocate to the state government, because I know our council won't be the only one in this boat, to say that if this subsidy is what the state government want to provide, then they should be also contributing to it, because with each new development, and we're going to have a lot more coming, the state government wants us to have 12,000 new dwellings in the next 25, 30 years, then we need to look at this seriously and advocate. And I think, again, coming back to how we can try and provide housing for a younger demographic, which is what our community plan says, it's what our draft UGMS says, it is looking at, is there any possibility to investigate what a multi-generational retirement village or residential, or sorry, maybe not retirement village, maybe residential park may look like. Because again, there's benefits in having a multi-generational community, and currently, as we've found out, banks will not loan to young people to buy into these developments. That's just one factor that prevents a young person entering. But I think it's only with advocacy and looking at maybe a creative solution that we might be able to find some other non-traditional avenues to help house our young people now and into the future. So I hope there's some support around this one, but again, it's starting that conversation.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Councillor Kremper, do you want to speak to this?
Thank you. I can understand Councillor Mann's concerns, and we have had in-depth discussions about this. My concern is when we start investigating about and looking at what sort of money we're missing out on from retirement villages, we're sending a really bad message to some of the most vulnerable people in our community that council just wants you to pay more. There is a reason that legislation is in there, is to protect some of the most vulnerable and elderly people in our community that do live in these parks and give them somewhere safe to live. Considering that we have quite a few here, I think it's a really bad message to be sending to the community, and I would assume there'd be quite a bit of a pushback on this sort of stuff. As for the multi-generational parks or same sort of enterprise, it's the same thing. I can understand how youth are feeling a little bit left out because it's hard to buy a house this day and age. But anything that doesn't address the fundamental issues with housing in this country, which is supply and demand, really is just tinkering around the edges. And I think actually giving the government a get out of jail card so they don't have to deal with the real issue in this country and what is affecting most of our youth. So I won't be supporting this, and I will never vote on anything that would increase the rates on our retirement villages in Victor Harbor.
Do I have anybody else? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, I look at some of this information in here, which I don't think is entirely correct. Under the legislation, it talks about Section 152, it talks about residential parks only. Retirement villages retirement villages do pay a fixed charge. It's only residential parks who don't actually pay it. The only residential park I know of is Rosetta Village, which doesn't pay fixed charge. So, and again, talking about the multi-generational aspects, I can see, again, may solve some of the housing problems for younger people, but these residential parks and villages are designed for a purpose, and they're all about looking after our older community in a more secured and a better offering facility than trying to maintain their own home. They pay a fee to, have their premises looked after while they're living in these villages. It frees up some local housing for purchasing. Yes, we do have a lot of people from Adelaide comes down to retire here, and that's why at the moment the market is driving what's going on, and that's the ability to sell to older generations and more so the younger. Because if the market was showing us that the younger generation was really buying up down here, then they'll be building houses for the younger generation, not retirees. So I think it's about the market-driven aspects of it. So again, this information is not, to me, what I've read under the Act is not correct.
Any further discussion? Councillor Burns?
A lot of the concerns about the retirement villages have already been expressed, but I also just want to put this in some context. Councillor Mann raised some valid points about young people, first home buyers, having challenges with banks. Well, every generation has had the same challenges. It's not unique to just now, but we've found ways around getting our first house and subsequent houses. So there are ways, and unfortunately part of it means you have to save and work longer and adjust your lifestyle to be able to afford the deposit to do that. Banks will give loans, but it's about risk, and you have to be in a job, and I think I just get concerned that it implies that this generation is the only one that has had challenges around getting houses. which I don't think is correct.
Councillor Mann, do you want to close the debate unless somebody else wants to speak?
Yeah, no, thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I'm happy to close that. I think there's probably definitely appreciate my fellow elected members' views. I think there may be a bit of confusion around the motion and some of the things stated. I guess in terms of Councillor Burns' comments and appreciate the financial advice for young people. I think the comment I made in relation to these retirement villages or residential villages, banks will not loan to young people for a lease arrangement. So it's not the case of a bank playing hardball with them. A bank's not going to give you money for a young person if they cannot secure a mortgage over the title, because with these retirement villages and residential villages, the people living there own the house, they don't own the land. So I think there's a bit of a distinction between that, but appreciate the comments. In terms of Councillor Kemp, in terms of the villages, in an email circulated back in, I think, February this year with everyone, I think you responded to it as well. There was administration provided a report of all the different retirement villages in Victor Harbor, and yes, it's more around looking strategically at the ones that will come. There's, we've got Rosetta Village and we've got Best Life off Canterbury Road, but also coming is Ocean View off the one off Waipinga Road, and then the Clayton, or the one near the Ocean development on the Ring Road. And when all of these are developed, there'll be about 1,245 properties that they're not paying that individual fixed charge on. I think in terms of Councillor Karemba's point, I think maybe he's misinterpreted the motion, because effectively the motion is saying to advocate to the state government for more funding for local councils who provide this subsidy. Okay, it's not looking at getting rid of that subsidy or taking issue with it. And I completely agree with him that a lot of the people in these retirement villages or residential villages are those who need the support of the local community. They're the ones that are on fixed income pensions. And I think that is definitely something we need to highlight. But also I think there's discussion, because we're going to have a lot more, and two of those retirement villages noted, their entry fees are not at an affordable rate. There could be $700,000-800,000 plus to enter. And effectively what the legislation, where it sits, is that they're also getting that subsidy, where potentially people with those private pools, the private lawn bowling greens and paying those high fees may not need the same subsidy that someone in a Rosetta Village may need. But effectively all this motion is saying to the state government, hey, we want you to provide more funding for councils so we can help our community, and we're not, and especially a community where Victor
Thank you,
Harbor
Councillor Mann.
at the forefront. I think there's benefit in it.
The debate has closed, Councillor Schiller. I'll now ask all of those in favour of recommendation 3. Those against? That's lost. Thank you.
Division, please.
Sorry?
Division.
A division, please. All those in favour? Councillor Mann, Councillor Burns, Councillor Karemba. Oh, sorry, let me start again. Scratch that, Chelsea. Councillor Mann and Councillor Quinton. Those against? Councillor Burns, Councillor Karemba and Councillor Kemp. Councillor Schiller and Councillor Schofield. That motion is lost.
I would have liked to have been able to have the opportunity to narrow it down to one of 3 of his points that I would have been happy to support, but the first 2, and I didn't get a chance to get that in, but if that's the way we're going, fine.
Yeah, thank you, Angela. I'm sorry I didn't realise that you wanted to talk. I thought I gave opportunity for those who wanted to speak during the debate to do so, but obviously I didn't give you enough of an opportunity, so I do apologise for that. Moving on to number 4, making local government more attractive. And I'll take that recommendation as read. I do think that is something that the LGA is working on specifically at the moment.
Can I ask for an adjustment to the wording of how it's written?
Of which one are you talking about?
The last one, number 4, in the actual recommendation, it's specifically mentioning that we're trying to target young people. I think it's not just the younger demographic, it's all demographics that we need to encourage. And I think it is part of the actual recommendation. So just that slight tweaking of the words, that we're not specifically trying to attract a younger demographic and an improved quality, if that's what you want to call it, of councillor, but that all demographics have that opportunity.
Let me just read what's written down here. Advocate the state government for meaningful reforms, funding and incentives to make being a councillor more appealing and to encourage a greater demographic to nominate in local government elections.
I think what may be requested is the removal of especially those of a younger demographic.
To encourage people, and to just encourage people to nominate.
Basically, any demographic at all can be encouraged.
Certainly. So moving Councillor Schiller, seconding that. Councillor Burns. Do you want to speak to that, Councillor Schiller? No, Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the challenges that have come out from the recent government inquiry has been a lot of community dissatisfaction with local government councils, and a lot of councils, rural and city, are having a lot of problems with people. I think a lot of that, even a lot of mayors have commented how the nature of councils has changed over the last 20 years. And I think it's unfortunate that more people don't vote and more people don't engage in council. I think they'd find it a much more rewarding experience than what they believe. And I think that what you tend to get is smaller factions or groups that aren't necessarily the best thing for a council. And I think this type of motion would hopefully advocate that we need to get more people involved in local government and more people standing of all demographics in and that can contribute for the whole community. I think it would actually be a healthy thing.
Thank you, Councillor Burns. Any further discussion? Councillor Kemp.
Just a clarification question. Is the motion changed? If it has, could you please read it out?
I thought I did read it out. The advocating the state government for meaningful reforms, funding and incentives to make being a councillor more appealing and to encourage people to nominate local government elections. Any further discussion? Councillor Schiller, do you want to close the debate? No. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. And just to let you know that the Local Government Association is doing a lot of work and also has a lot of work that is currently planned, especially coming up to the election next year, to encourage more people to nominate for local councils, to nominate for mayors, so that will be starting to happen. You'll probably see at the beginning of next year, really encouraging a much broader demographic, including young people, people of different ages and demographics, I suppose, if you've got it here. So this is happening, but I think that this is a good motion and recommendation, which will highlight to the LGA that is something that councils are recognising and wanting to occur. We now move to 9.5, the council assessment panel. So you may remember that we have now got the regional assessment panel, which is taking on the development assessment queries from the region rather than just from Victor Harbor. The difficulty is that there are still people from the CAT or projects, developments that did go through the cap that need to go back to the cap because they started there. So what this recommendation is doing is getting back to the council assessment panel and doing that in relation to the terms of reference, because we'll need both of them side by side for a short period of time. If you have any questions, Graham may be able to answer that. But I'll do that recommendation 1 and 2 on block. Can you use your microphone, please?
Sorry, there's parts of 1 I disagree with, and other parts I agree with. So I prefer that it's done separately.
If you're looking at the aesthetic fees, is that the part that you don't agree with?
No, just the reduction in independent members from 2 from 3. I think it's important to keep it at 3 for balance and checks of the local cap, given the amount of development we've got on working. I know it's for a period of time, but I think it's important that we maintain continuity rather than reduce it down. I think it dilutes it.
Okay, I'm happy to do that first recommendation that adopts the following changes to the council assessment panel. So that's just recommendation A, 1A. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Kremper. And seconding, please, Councillor Burns. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Kremper? No, it's just that recommendation. Recommendation 1, 1A, as on the, nothing's been changed.
Sorry, I thought we were changing it. That was Councillor Burns' request to change it back to the original 3 independent members.
Oh, okay. Yep, that's fine then, if that's what you both are wanting. So you're wanting 3 independent members?
Please.
Yep, just a moment. 3 independent members and 1 council member and 1 deputy council member. Is that
correct? It's
correct?
as it was.
Right. I'm going to ask Graham to speak, just to provide some information about the consequences of that before we move forward, just so that everyone's got in their head whether or not there's anything about that that might be problematic. And then I'll come to you, Angela. Graham?
Through the Mayor. The notion here is that it's not expected that the cap would indeed need to meet all that often, if at all, ever. It's really so that the delegations to the development manager can continue under the legislation. So, but in the event that they did have to meet for a legacy matter, which is, like I said, unlikely, the idea was keep it simple and minimal with 2 and an elected member, so that can still have a majority vote if it needed. And also on the basis that the other memberships have expired, and these the 2 members that we're suggesting are ongoing. So the impact is, it's not impossible to do, but the impact is we have to then go through an expression of interest process for a single member, and the recruitment that goes with that for circumstances that are quite unusual, given that this is the first time this type of thing's happened in the state under the new system. But we'd have to go through that process, and the expense of that process as well for somebody that may never have to sit on a panel, but just be a reserve or retained. So that's the logic behind where we're at the moment.
Are you happy to keep it at 2? Councillor Kremper?
Councillor Schiller was first.
My query is,
Well,
it will determine whether we go from 2 to 3. So
okay.
is it possible to ask the question?
Yes, all right.
Can Graham give us an instance where something will come back to the cap rather than go to the regional cap?
Potentially something like the Ocean development. That's a staged development over many years that has an earlier stage of approval. Most things would happen through the staged development under the delegation that's already been provided to the assessment manager through the panel. But there could be a circumstance at some point if there was an appeal against the decision, against a particular condition that existed within that that development approval that would need to go to the ERD court, and generally those things would go back to the CAP panel to review, and they're not dealt with under delegation. So that might be the odd occasion that the CAP would have to meet. I couldn't think of any others that really would occur.
Now I'll go back to the mover and the seconder. Are you moving 3 or 2 independent members?
I'm moving 3. I just had a question for to the director, Pat House.
So you want to move 3?
Yeah.
Okay. And you have a question for Director Pat House?
Yeah. So what you're saying that is, if there was a development had gone through the original cap and for whatever reason needed another review or a change or further investigation, it's only for that reason that we would go back or have the 3. But if we don't have the 3 and then something changes, and would that open us up then for that developer or whoever it is that has the issue with cap to then claim or have an issue with the fact that we've gone from 3 to 2 and changed the whole terms of reference during this process? Wouldn't it be better to just keep it as is until we close the books on the cap per se?
Through the Mayor, the Victor Harbor cap is the Victor Harbor cap, and the members do change from time to time. So it may well not be that one of the existing members that were on cap, because their terms have expired anyway, would be the 3rd member. So there's never that level of continuity. And from time to time, from the inception of cap, and I couldn't tell you how long ago now, but quite a few years ago, council have changed terms of reference and amended meeting procedures and the like. So those things do change. It's within council's remit to be able to do that.
And members come and go. Yep. Leaving it at 3. If that 3 is lost, then somebody might want to move a motion afterwards to bring it back to 2. But we have a motion on the floor that there's 3 independent members, 1 council member, 1 deputy council member, moved by Councillor Burns, seconded by Councillor Koremba. Do either of you want to speak to that? No. Councillor Koremba?
Thanks. As I said, I just think for something that's really not going to cost anything, it just gives you that, certainty and no other issues may arise, to have those 2 members. My question also would be is that if we go back to 2, does that mean we have 4 people voting?
2 things. One, it will cost, because if it's another independent, then you've got an extra $400 for the independent member.
If they sit.
As retainer as well. And also the cost of advertising and securing another independent member. So there is that cost that's associated with it. And your second question?
No, I was just asking about, if we do vote, so how many members are now going to be voting on an assessment? Is it 4? 4?
2, well.
So who would be the deciding vote if you've got 4 members?
Right.
Yeah, through the Mayor, it's not 4 members, it's 3 members.
3 members.
Yeah, and the deputy member, the deputy council member, so the subpage 3 there is the proxy for the council member.
All right. So if you have 3 independent members and 1 council member, you actually have an even number of members, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And in which case, if that was to continue down that path,
The chair.
yeah, the chair would have the deciding
Okay.
vote and casting vote.
That's fine.
Can I please foreshadow that if this is lost, that I would put forward the original recommendation of 2, please.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the recommendation as it stands? All those in favour?
Okay.
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon, Councillor Schofield.
If we're looking at 3 independent members, then I can't support it. And the reason being that I actually look at, one, it is the cost, but the amount of work that our staff will have to do to look at a 3rd member, with the possibility that this particular group may not even meet in a 12-month period. So I just think it's the waste of resources, and I can't support 3 independent members.
Councillor Burns, if you want to close the debate.
Thank you. Just on that point, we did have 3 independent members, and we did provision in the budget for those costs, and staff were providing the resources to those positions. So all we're doing is potentially reducing it down. It's not necessarily going to be extra costs, because it should already be within the current budget. That's all.
Thank you. I'll put that motion to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's lost. Councillor Schiller foreshadowed
The original
the original
2
motion
member motion,
for
please.
two independent members. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Schofield, thank you. Councillor Schiller, do you want to speak to your motion?
Just that because we're paying a retainer as well as any sitting fee for a committee that's hopefully won't have much work to do. I think it's a sensible thing to do.
Thank you. Councillor Schofield, do you want to speak to this? No. Anybody want to speak to this? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. I'll do recommendation B and C together. Would someone like to move that? Thank you, Councillor Schofield. And seconding that, please, Councillor Burns. Do either of you want to speak to that?
Thank you, Mayor. Just that I know both of them are from time when I was on the CAP, and I think they're both good quality people.
Great. Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. And the second recommendation, that council adopt the reviewed council assessment panel terms of reference as provided at attachment 1. Moving that way, Councillor Kemp, thank you. And seconding, Councillor Schofield. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you very much. We now move to 9.6, the review of the art, curatorial and preservation policy. And the recommendation is that council adopts that reviewed policy at attachment 1. Moving that way, Councillor Kemp, and seconding that, please. Thank you, Councillor Quinton. Either of you want to speak to that? Anybody want to speak to that? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. 9.7 is the partial review of the delegations register. The first recommendation, the revocation of the delegations. Would somebody like to move that? Thank you, Councillor Kemp. And seconding that, please, Councillor Mann. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. The delegations made under the Local Government Act, recommendation 2, both A and B. We're looking at local government regulations and State Planning Commission practice direction. of designated instruments. Would someone like to move that recommendation, please? Thank you, Councillor Schofield, and seconding that, please. Councillor Kemp, do either of you want to speak to that? No. Anyone want to speak to it? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. Encounter Bay Netball Club lease variation at 10.1, and the recommendation is that council approve the deed of variation of lease for the Encounter Bay Netball Club. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Schiller. And do I have a seconder for that?
I was just going to ask.
Councillor, sorry, Quinton seconding that.
Yeah.
Councillor Schiller and Councillor Quinton, do you want to speak to that? No. You've got a question, Councillor Burns?
I did. We had provision money for the resurfacing of courts in the budget, but I think that varying the lease and looking at some of the other clubs that may have competing requirements for some of the space for a fourth court, I would actually like to see this deferred until we sort out the sports precinct, because if we go ahead with the sports precinct, it may be the netball club uses the new sporting facility and may not necessarily need all the an extra court.
We haven't got anything related to netball in the sports precinct design and plans that have gone through.
On the courts, it can be basketball or netball or other sports.
These are outside netball courts. Yeah. Any further discussion? Councillor Kemp?
I prefer to adjourn this to another council meeting. Sorry, I'll adjourn this until we get confirmation of grant funding for the change of the lease, because it's all hooked on the 475,000 grant funding. If the Netball Association doesn't get that, then they won't go ahead with their fourth court. So why should we be varying the lease when at the moment we don't know whether they'll get the grant funding for the fourth? So I prefer to adjourn this motion until we get the knowledge, information of the grant funding.
Do I have a second for the formal motion? Councillor Burns? All those in favour of adjourning this, when do you want it to adjourn to?
Well, it was adjournment due to the confirmation of the grant funding and be brought back to the council at the following council meeting. Whenever that will be, I don't know, because I don't know when the grant funding will be.
I've got a question.
No questions on formal motions, no debate on formal motions. So the motion is that the matter be adjourned until the confirmation of the grant funding and report back to the following council meeting following the announcement. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4. Those against? That's carried. Uh, 10.2, the proposed dog off leash. The recommendation is that council has said that this location is not suitable for the establishment of a 24-hour dog off leash. But if you look on page 46, there's also 3 other options for recommendations. Would somebody like to move?
I'd like to move the motion to renew the trial for another year.
I would second that.
Okay. So the recommendation is that council, having undertaken the trial of the foreshore area contiguous with Franklin Parade between Harbourview Terrace and Oakham Street, determined that the trial is renewed for another year. Are both of you happy with that? Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Schiller? No. Councillor Burns?
Thank you. I understand that there's some alternative places being proposed, but at this point, I think by extending it for further 12 months, we'll actually really be able to assess if there is impact or not. And also people in Victor need to have an area of 24 hours off leash, and they're constantly being restricted. And I think we need to support areas where people can take their dogs, not just dog parks.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, so I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. 10.3, which is the Youth Development Officer position review. The recommendation is that Council approve a permanent increase to 0.8 full-time equivalent for the Youth Development Officer position. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Burns, thank you. And seconding that, Councillor Schofield. Do either of you want to speak to that?
Thank you, Mann. I think it's important that we have a youth development officer, and over the last 12 months, I've had the opportunity to see some of the meetings where the youth development officer has participated in, and seeing some of the good work that's been done. I think it's important for that demographics of our community.
Thank you. Councillor Schofield? No. Councillor Karemba?
Yeah, just a question. So what does this wage actually, what is the figure of this wage now being 0.8? What's the figure? How much are we spending? I know we're adding 30,000, or is it redirected annual budget allocation of 30,000? Is that on top of the 0.5?
No, it's as per the current budget. There's no changes to the budget. The
Okay.
position has been built 0.8. It's been budgeted at 0.8. It's just continuing on as 0.8. There's no increase to budget.
Great, thanks.
Any further questions or discussion? In that case, I'll put that to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Risk appetite statements, and the recommendation, this is 11.1, is that Council adopt the risk appetite statements as provided at attachment 2 to the report. Would someone like to move that way, please? Thank you, Councillor Mann, and seconding Councillor Quinton. Do either of you want to speak to that? Councillor Quinton, no. Anyone want to speak to that? Councillor Burns and then Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor. My recollection and my notes was from the workshop that with everything aligned except for infrastructure, where I had a higher category than accepting from the workshop, that we talked about everything else aligns correctly. And the reason that was mentioned was to do with a lot of the ageing infrastructure, and that a lot of the dates have been pushed out, and that we really need to keep a focus on our infrastructure, and because it's a hidden cost to the community and it impacts our rate levels if we don't keep on top of it. And I think having a more cautious category provided that overwatch. Everything else aligned okay.
Thank you, Councillor Burns. Councillor Kemp.
Yes, I had similar thoughts about when I read through this, that the infrastructure and assets is a more of a cautious risk appetite, more so than an accepting one, because as Councillor Burns said, it's one of our key major issues in the city is that we maintain our infrastructure, and we need to keep maintaining the funding for that. And so I think that's what we've got to be more cautious about and not just be accepting. So I like to move an amendment to have those changes made to the infrastructure and assets from cautious and accepting from accepting and open.
To see what Chelsea's put up here. Do I have a seconder for your amendment, Councillor Burns? It's an amendment, not a formal motion. Yes. Yeah. Seconded by Councillor Burns. Thank you. So the amendment is that the infrastructure and assets section of the risk appetite statements be amended to reflect changes from accepting and open to cautious and accepting. Yep. Yep. Do you want to speak to the amendment? If
No,
you
I
sp- if you
I
speak-
did already. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. We'll put the amendment then. So this is just the amendment. I'll put that to the floor. All those who agree and those who don't. That's carried. So that amendment now becomes part of the recommendation. So the recommendation is that council adopt the risk appetite statements as provided at attachment 2 to this report, and that the infrastructure and asset section of the risk appetite statements be amended from accepting and open to cautious and accepting.
Sorry, Mayor, can I make another amendment, please?
You can.
I'd just like to amend where for the reputation or where it says accepting, that we actually change that to cautious.
On what?
On reputation. So change it from accepting to cautious.
Which part of reputation?
Well, it says the level accepting. I'd like to change that to cautious.
On what grounds?
Well, I think it sends a clear message that we're quite happy to cop negative feedback from the community, no matter how large it is, as long as we keep pressing ahead with things. I think that's actually a really bad statement. I think even though the community only gets to vote once, they should have a say all the time. And if there's enough community pushback on an issue, then we should be listening to them. But I think as it reads now, we're going to sit there and be quite accepting and it doesn't matter and we're just going to steam along. I think that's a really bad message. So all I'm asking is that we change it from accepting to cautious.
For which? For the reputation?
Yeah, I think it's really important that we try and
For
keep
the
a good
accepting to
reputation.
cautious.
Yeah.
So for those people, for elected members, that's on page 181. And at the moment where it says reputation, it says accepting. So do I have a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Burns, seconding that. Do you want to speak to that?
Thank you, Mayor. I think Councillor Krember made a valid point that swayed me over, is that it's not, we're here to represent the community, and if the community are expressing concerns, we won't always please everyone, I understand that, but sometimes when there is a lot of concern, we need to take it under consideration, not just acknowledge it and do what we want to do anyway. And I think it's important that we say to the community that whilst we may have differences of opinions and you may not necessarily agree, we're happy to take on board your comments. And I think at the moment it's basically saying that you can complain, but it's going to go nowhere. And I think the wording needs to be a little bit more positive so the community feel a bit more engaged. And I think by going to cautious, it will allow that.
Okay, so we're talking about a risk here in terms of being a cautious risk. Put that amendment to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. So we add that amendment to the recommendation. So the recommendation is that council adopt the risk appetite statements as provided attachment 2. That the infrastructure and assets section of the risk appetite statements be amended from accepting and open to cautious and accepting, and that the reputational section of the risk appetite statements be amended from accepting to cautious. Any further discussion in relation to the amendment? Those who have talked to the recommendation, rather, those who have talked to the amendment will have been taken to speak to the recommendation. If there's no further discussion, I'll put that to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. 12.1 Armstrong Road Safe Crossing. I will do this on block unless there is anyone that wants them divided up. So the recommendations is to receive and note the report. Approval be sought from the Department of Infrastructure and Transport to install smart warning signs, and that council consider the installation of a pedestrian activated crossing as part of its annual business planning and budget in future years when pedestrian numbers warrant it. Individually, sure. So the first one is that council receive and note the safe road crossing report. Moving that way, Michael, and seconding Councillor Burns. Either of you want to speak to receiving, noting the report?
Thank you, Mayor.
Sorry, I'll ask Councillor Quinton
Sorry.
first, who moved it.
Yeah, yeah, I'd just like to say that the report makes sense, and it's one of the key findings was that the current crossing is demonstrably unsafe. Well, I guess I'll leave it at that, and I'll speak to the second recommendation in a minute, actually. So, but that's the first point.
Thank you, Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to acknowledge, I think it was important to at least investigate. Whilst there were potential concerns, the numbers of usage were still very low, and I think should the sports precinct or other development happen in that area, the numbers will get quite substantive, and then we can revisit it to what we do. But I think it's important to note that it's a watching concern, not something we have to necessarily act on now.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any further discussion about receiving and noting the report? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Recommendation 2, can I have someone to move that? Councillor Quinton? And does someone second that?
Amend it if I can.
Recommend it?
Yeah. So speaking to the report, I think one of the key considerations from the report needs to be that currently at the end, so on the Investigator College side of the refuge, there is no pathway that links the pedestrian refuge to the college.
So what's your amendment for recommendation 2?
Basically that we scrap it and go to and amend. So you don't have...
It's too big. Amendment is adding a little something small.
Okay.
By scrapping it, you're removing the substantive motion.
Can I just talk to it first, and then we can figure out how to...
There is no motion there. All right. So you can move whatever you want.
Can I just talk to it first, so then we can kind of figure out what's going to be the best way to go about it?
Yep.
Thank you. So there's work that is planned, as I understand, for the 25-26 budget to have a pathway that links Investigator College to the pedestrian refuge.
Is there? Correct.
So at the moment, when you go across a pedestrian refuge and you want to get to the college, either you have to cut across the hockey ground, or which is riding a bike across grass, which is not really doable. You can walk across it relatively easily. But if you want to go with a bicycle, you have to go along Armstrong Road, and there's basically a narrow gap of grass that goes to the bitumen where the cars are right there, or you have to ride bikes through a drainage ditch. So at the moment, not many people, the low numbers in the report, I think aren't surprising because not many people are really using the crossing. However, once that pathway is built and it links it, you're going to see a big increase in those numbers. The peak, I think they found, was 42, and the threshold for going to the pedestrian actuated crossing was 60. So I feel that whilst the short-term option would be good if the pathway wasn't going in the next budget, however, given that we're going to go from short to long-term very quickly, I think it would be a good idea to move straight to action 3 or item 3, and actually look at trying to put in the pedestrian activated crossing now.
So you should just move number 3 if number 2 is we don't need to move number 2. You can just say we can go to move number 3. Yep. Happy to move number 3. Do I have a second for number 3? Councillor Krember. Do either of you want to speak to that? We probably just have. Councillor Krember.
Just a question. So we're allocating $10,000 for a traffic consultant. Do we have any staff members that can do these sort of consultations, or do we have to always outsource it?
We've already done that.
Oh, okay, no problem.
That's got no,
Just a question.
yeah. Any further discussion? Councillor Schiller and then Councillor Burns.
Just a query. We're talking about how we're doing the investigator shared pathway is in the current budget. That's correct.
This is recommendation 3, that council consider installation of a pedestrian activated crossing as part of its annual business planning and budget processes in a future year when the pedestrian numbers warrant the required level of expenditure.
So we have no timeline in this particular recommendation there.
No fine line.
Timeline.
No.
All right, that's fine. Because basically what Michael is stating, that he thinks that once that other shared pathway goes in, then that crossing will increase. But I'm happy to accept that if the recommendation that's put, which is number 3, is put, it's still not until that other component's in place. We will be obviously looking at it in the near future, but not in the next budget, for instance. So I'm happy to support it.
It says business planning and budget process in a future year when pedestrian numbers warrant it. Example, once the regional community sport and recreation precinct is operational. You have a question,
Can we amend that to e.g. once the regional community sport and recreation precinct is operational, and once the encounter linking pathway is operational, to include.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Burns? And the encounter linking pathway is operational.
Did have a question too.
Yeah, hang on. Councillor Burns, you've got a question?
If we take out all of 2, aren't we still required to seek approval from the Department of Infrastructure and Transport to install?
Can we just focus on 3 and then we can come back to 2?
Okay. I just think, don't we still need to include in 3 then, if we're going to get rid of 2, that we still have to seek approval for the smart warning signs?
We haven't even talked about smart warning signs. 3 doesn't mention that at all. Does anybody else want to speak to recommendation 3? Councillor Quinton, do you want to close the debate?
I'll just close it by saying we've already spent 10 grand establishing that it's unsafe, and I'd rather not spend another $50,000 for a short-term fix, and just basically spend the money wisely and go to the long-term solution.
Put that to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Recommendation 2 is still sitting there, so no one's asked to move it. So I'm just saying, does anybody want to move recommendation 2? That lapses for want of a mover. We look at 12.2, the speed limit review, Victor Harbour Ring Route. The recommendation is that council acknowledge and thank the department for its consideration of reducing speed limits. We're being very polite. Thank you, Councillor Burns. And seconding, please, Councillor Schofield. Either of you want to speak to that?
Thank you, Mayor. I thought what they came back with made a bit of sense. In some areas they're supportive of reduction of the speed limit, and others about improving the signage, which I think makes sense.
Any further discussion? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. 12.3, one-way traffic proposal on Almond Avenue. The recommendation is that council endorse the proposal. Does someone want to move that way? Councillor Kemp, thank you.
Yes, I'd like to do an amendment to it, that council investigate the proposal, not endorse it.
I think council has investigated it, hence the commentary that they have done. They have met with several of the residents also to explain the proposal and received a petition from some of the residents there and have done an investigation. So this is about endorsing it post-investigation.
So, again, all right, I'll move it at this stage and I'll speak to it. If page 226 of the agenda shows the route for one way is going left as you approach Almond Avenue, which means that anyone going to the football club will have to go around Almond Avenue to get to the football club over.
Mark can talk to that.
Thank you, through the Mayor. And the proposal with the direction signs and the attachment is from the residents, not from staff. So what we're saying is, in the report, is we're recommending to council that it be made one way, and that a traffic consultant look at the exact issue that you're talking about to determine which direction is best. Because in theory, you could get to the end of the road, and yeah, might have difficulty with the turning circle there. So we're asking for your support to make it one way, and that following traffic consultants work out which way is best.
That's why I moved an amendment for investigation, because that's part of the process, is contacting the consultant, contacting the residents, because you're looking at the majority owners have to agree to it. So as part of an investigation process, so I prefer to see it that way, but that's my amendment.
We have Councillor Kemp. So you don't need to amend it, Councillor Kemp. You can just, it's your proposal as the mover. So we can put investigate.
Yep, that's all. Remove it, endorsed, and just put investigate. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Karemba. Do you want to speak to it? Does anybody want to speak to it? Councillor Schofield?
I think I'm having the seniors moment, because when I look at that, I would look at the Coolaroo Road is just head straight down, turns into the oval, but we're just asking for Almond Avenue, which comes off of that road and back onto it. So I didn't think that we were looking at a one-way that included Coolaroo Road, because if I was living in there, I get to Almond Avenue and just travel around until I get back onto the road that's going to take me back out again. So I can't see why we'd have to have a look at Coolaroo Road being a one-way. It stays a double, because you need to get the people out of the oval as well. Sorry.
Yeah, Coolaroo is two-way. Yep. Yep. Any further discussion? In that case, then, if this...
Still like the word investigation more so than endorsing the process, because you're still having to go through the process of getting information and then bring it back to chamber for a decision.
I'll bring it back to the chamber again. You want? Okay. And if this one is lost, then someone can put the original recommendation forward. All those in favour? Those against? That's lost. Does somebody want to move the original motion? Councillor Schofield. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Burns. Do either of you want to speak to that, or has that been spoken to already?
It's been spoken to already.
All those in favour of the original motion? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Minutes of council meetings. The first one is the Southern Community Transport Advisory Committee minutes. Recommendation is that we receive and note them. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Burns, and seconding Councillor Quinton. Any questions about those minutes? All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. There are no subsidiaries or representative reports tonight. No matters of urgency, no questions on notice. Are there any questions without notice? Councillor Kemp.
It's going back to what we already discussed earlier, but I didn't get a chance to because we moved on. But the question is to Director Padhouse, does a developer need to declare a known hazard on land before a building consent is given?
Through the mayor, I'm not sure that they have to declare it to council if there's a known hazard on the land. There's sort of moral obligations.
Declare it to the assessment manager of the who approved the development plan.
So if the developer knows that there's a hazard on the land, does he have to declare that to an assessment manager? Is that the question?
Yeah, basically, I guess what I'm saying is that, if someone's going to build a house on a piece of land there and there's known hazard on that land, who actually notifies the assessment process that there's a hazard there, and that may affect the approval of the development?
Generally speaking, if the developer was aware of that and they understood that that would impact their development, they would go through the process of ameliorating that in some way, shape or form. So that might be an engineer's report. It might be filled, for instance, and then they'll need an engineer's report to do certain things. If there's site contamination and it's not identified, but the developer knows about it, certainly would be in the best interests of the developer to deal with that prior to developing. Whether or not that needs to be declared to the assessment manager would depend on the referral requirements that exist with the development. So if the referral, if it was a known contaminated site and registered as such through the EPA, for instance, as service stations are, and other places that might hold fuel, that would usually require a referral to the EPA, and then the EPA does that assessment. So in some respects, it would depend on the conditions and what those circumstances were.
Just a follow-up question, if I may. Just trying to think. Basically, if the planning department is aware of a hazard on a piece of land which is going to be developed, they need to make decisions on that if they're aware of it.
If the development assessment process becomes aware during the process, yes, it could seek further advice or a report from the developer, or advice from another agency, or an expert in the field if that was determined or discovered during the course of an assessment. Yes.
Yeah. Just to clarify, just briefly and quickly, because council's aware of asbestos around Mount Bracken, according to what happened tonight. So how would the assessment manager assess a development if it knows about the asbestos issue?
Well, council's become aware of the asbestos issue because complaints were made. So that's post the development application. So that becomes an issue, as explained earlier by the mayor, that then goes through Safe Work SA or the EPA.
Thank you.
Other questions without notice? Councillor Schofield.
May I just follow up on that one to Director Padhouse? So if there's been a contamination found on that land, it's been reported, wouldn't that then be an incumbent on the title and the conveyancer, when you're purchasing that, has to show what that is? Is that right?
Look through the mayor, I wouldn't be able to speak into the detail of how that would work with confidence off the top of my head. But certainly once certain things are determined about site, certain declarations or findings, whether it's contamination is a good example, that would generally be recorded on the title if it's registered with the EPA as being a contaminated site, for instance. Yes.
Are there any other questions about notice? If not, we'll move on to motions on notice, 18.1. And this is a recommendation from Councillor Mann. So, Councillor Mann, would you like to propose your motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Jenkins. The motion is that administration open dialogue with developers/builders who are operating locally around the possibility of them offering settlement upon completion homes for first home buyers.
Do I have a seconder for that recommendation? If I don't have a seconder, that will lapse for want of a seconder. Councillor Quinton, you seconding that? Thank you. Councillor Mann, do you want to speak to your motion?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I guess this is about asking that question locally of our developers and those who are building locally around whether there's that scope for them to offer a settlement upon completion development for first home buyers. There's been comments around supply and demand, and Victor Harbour is going to have an incredible amount of supply coming with the significant amount of growth that is earmarked for our town. However, as discussed and as we've spent a lot of time looking at, a lot of that growth is not targeted for a younger demographic. But if there's the possibility of asking the question and seeing whether some of the potential development or future growth can be delivered in a way such as a settlement upon completion offer, whereby it gives first home buyers a incredible leap up or incredible benefit for them getting into the market, assisting whether that's saving up the deposit over a longer period of time or potentially it's delaying some of those costs so they can afford market rental. This is saying to our community that council, as we've told our community we will in our community plan and draft UGMS, is looking at any possible way we can try and support our younger people. This isn't agreeing to do certain things or to take on costs. It's asking the question and it's looking at what are those possibilities to work with our local developers to encourage first home buyers, because it's the whole community that we need younger people down here. It's especially our builders who, if they're going to deliver the amount of homes that are coming, they need young people to help deliver those homes. They need apprentices, they need builders. And I think this is, again, starting the discussion, opening up that dialogue. Maybe nothing comes from it, but I think it's good to at least look at whatever creative solutions that at a council and a local government level we can find, whilst we wait for the state and federal government to try and solve the housing crisis. But I think we need to be proactive, we need to take steps, and I hope fellow elected members can see some benefit in looking at this.
Thank you. Councillor Quinton, you seconded this. Do you want to speak to it?
I just think it's a good initiative and we should be supporting this.
Thank you. Councillor Schiller?
A couple of things. I don't think this is a part that council should be playing at this level where we're approaching individual developers. As mentioned in the previous LGA recommendations, if the cost that a building will cost will eventually be put on the price of the property, and if a developer is having to pay for their materials up front and hold those materials, build the house, and then hand over the house at settlement, that means they are probably having an overdraft or a loan which would be much higher than a home loan rate, for instance. So in a way, you could be pushing the price up of materials because the price of materials aren't being paid for on the spot. They are being delayed till the settlement date. So it's just I think it's just the economics of it all for the developer. It doesn't make development sense to me. So I think there are other ways that council could look at trying to do what you're trying to do, looking at things like examples like Renew SA, where plots of land are purchased and the actual price of the land is significantly low. Small footprints of properties, so that is, I'll give an example. Tonsley Village, they are a very small footprint. The actual land cost was very low. Obviously, it was in the Tonsley area where there'd been an industrial area previously. So although that's, I don't know where or how that could possibly eventuate within Victor Harbor, I'd rather be trying to approach government directly, looking at a location where they came in and found a developer to develop that land with low-cost housing, rather than us out there approaching developers ad hoc.
Does anybody else want to speak to this? Councillor Karemba?
Thank you, Mayor. Once again, I can understand what Councillor Mann is trying to do, and I sympathise with him. But I'm now speaking as a builder. If anybody from council came to me and said, would you be interested in settlement upon completion, my first question would be, who's going to pay for the covering costs? Because there are a lot. And what do I get out of it? There's enough work out there now that we can't even keep up with the normal builds. But you know, anything where government gets involved, generally things just go up in price, not down. That's history over and over again. And any motion that comes to this chamber that does not include the reduction in immigration numbers or demand of housing really is just a complete and utter waste of time, in my opinion.
Any further discussion? Councillor Kemp?
Yes, I agree with Councillor Schiller. I think, you know, this is not in council's remit to actually spend time and energy and money on going out and lobbying developers and builders. I guess we can spend our time better by lobbying the government to actually, under the arguments process, the urban growth management strategy to release land for affordable housing. That's what we should be pushing for. And so these houses can be built for younger generations.
Any further discussion? Councillor Mann, do you want to close the debate?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Jenkins. No, I definitely appreciate the views around the chamber. I think, you know, there's council has certain spheres of influence and certain things that we can try and do. And yes, they're limited in scope, but I think it's around if we can try and find an avenue, or if we can try and find a way to support our younger people. I think, as we've told our community in our strategic documents, we should be doing it. So it's disappointing, but I do appreciate the views exchanged, and maybe some of these other options we can continue pursuing, but there's plenty to look at, but I appreciate everyone's views.
Thank you. I'll put that motion to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's lost.
I'll call a division as well.
Division, please. All those in favour? Councillor Mann and Councillor Quinton. Those against? Councillor Burns, Councillor Karemba, Councillor Kemp, Councillor Schiller and Councillor Schofield. That motion has lost. We now move into confidential items. We have one of those.
Without notice.
Yep, I beg your pardon, we do. Motions without notice.
I'd like to take Braden's, if you look at his motion in the LGA's recommendations to take to the LGA, in part 3, he's got 3 components. 1 and 2, I don't agree with, but for part 3, where we possibly advocate for multi-generational housing similar to what aged housing is occurring, I think that's worthwhile, because that is not having an impact on our resources is just advocating for that style of housing. So that we could probably directly lift the wording from part 3 of the third motion regarding intergenerational housing within those styles of villages.
That the annual general meeting, that the annual general meeting advocate to the state and federal government to investigate the viability, constraints and opportunities for government and or private enterprise to create multi-generational residential parks, as opposed to every current one which is legally excludes those under the age of around 50 years.
Yes.
Yep. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Mann, if you want to second that, given that it was your motion. Thank you. Councillor Sheila, do you want to speak to that?
I wasn't comfortable with 1 and 2, but I'm comfortable with this recommendation because there is a huge disadvantage to young people not being able to access that style of housing, and there's also instances where there are, in particular with people with disabilities, where they may have aging parents, but they cannot locate that their younger generation within that village in a close location. So I think it has merit to investigate that style of accommodation.
Thank you. Councillor Mann?
I just thank Councillor Sheila. I appreciate her putting up this third motion. I think there is some benefit in it. I think, I guess if there were to be ones that benefited younger people, then those subsidies would also apply to a younger demographic as well. So it would be shared across the board. But I think it's important for us to investigate.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Kemp?
Yeah, I do have concerns with this because we did discuss this earlier on around the fact that the residential parks has its own act. I know we're not talking about retirement villages, but they operate under a separate act. But they're there for a reason, but they serve the same purpose about supporting older generations to live in a community which is safe and secured and have their facilities looked after by the owners of the park. So incorporating young families into a residential park, I don't think would work. I think there'll be complications with that. And of course, you've got to go into a further look at exactly what the purpose of those residential parks and retirement villages are there for, and you'll be breaking that. So I won't be supporting this.
Councillor Kemp, just to clarify, the motion doesn't talk about having younger people and different demographics in current residential parks. It looks to create multi-generational recreational parks. So rather than just having recreational parks for older people, to have some multi-generational ones. I think that's how I read it.
So recreational or residential?
Or residential, rather. Yeah. Councillor Karemba? Councillor Burns?
Thank you, Mayor. I was just wondering if Councillor Schiller may consider, rather than saying residential parks, say low-cost housing. So we're talking about multi-generational low-cost housing solutions rather than residential parks.
The point of the residential parks is the reason for the low cost is that that would be similar where they're not paying rates, like large rateable for each property. I would assume, would that be how that would be indicated in those residential parks rather than low cost housing?
Low cost housing would pay individual rates for each house, whereas a residential park would operate under the Residential Parks Act, which may need to be amended.
I think there's two separate things. The idea of low cost housing and looking at Renewal SA, etc., is a different concept again to this. So I don't think they are. It needs to be one or the other. I think this is one component that we could try to advocate for, and that we look at other forms of low cost housing, including going to the state, looking at things like Renewal SA and as things like the Tonsley Village and other villages that are happening in metropolitan areas on a smaller scale within Victor Harbour. So isolate affordable housing in a separate way, which we may well be able to discuss. We're obviously in our strategy in the future, whether we have a housing strategy or in workshop form, but I'm still happy to leave the wording as it is.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Schiller, I think you've closed the debate. All those in favour? Those against? Sorry, can we do that again? All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4. And those against? 1, 2, 3. That's carried. Thank you.
Call a division on that one as well, please.
All those in favour, please stand. Councillor Mann and Councillor Burns, Councillor Schiller and Councillor Quinton. Those against, Councillor Paremba, Councillor Kemp and Councillor Schofield. Are there any other motions without notice? Councillor Kemp.
Yes, I'm moving a motion without notice concerning a deputation we had tonight about administration to remove the parking conditions from the lease, which affects the running of the beachside markets.
I might just ask, I think Graham, did you talk before about why they, no, Mark did, can you talk to that before we put it?
Point of order, thank you.
I will refuse that motion, given in that case then, given that I'd like a report to come back to council in relation to that. We've had a deputation, and I think that if we want to make a motion in relation to that deputation, because there are connotations in relation to the health of the trees, the report needs to come back to council. So I'm refusing that motion, Councillor Kemp.
Could that report also take into other things like the farmers market where they park their cars on the green around trees?
I'm sure that could come in the report from.
Yeah, because we want to make sure everything's level.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. So I've just asked for that report to come from administration.
Yes, the report was going to come back just to give an indication of all the different markets that we have and the conditions. So, and the markets, there are provisions for vehicles on the grounds, but it's actually to put equipment on and then remove them off. So we wanted to provide that information and report to members.
Are there any other motions without notice? In that case, then we now move to confidential items. And the first recommendation is to go into confidence. Because the information to be received, discussed or considered is information relating to matters that must be considered in confidence to ensure council does not breach any duty of confidence. Would someone like to move that way, please? Thank you, Councillor Schofield, and seconding that, Councillor Schiller. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the gallery for coming along tonight. If you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to give us a holler.
Sure. Sorry,